Welcome to this webinar hosted by Kumu and our colleagues with the EPIC Network. We are excited about the reaction and participation for this topic, and we're excited to see what happens over the next hour. We are going to be efficient with our time, and we are hoping to pack a lot in. I wanted to start with, for anyone who I don't know, introducing myself. My name is Bobby Lauer, and I am the Executive Director of Kumu, and I am sitting in my office here at Towson University, where I serve as an Associate Vice President. To get us started, I just wanted to run through our agenda. We're going to, as I've said, start with me providing a brief introduction, and then we're going to get right down to the work. We're first going to hear from Joel Rogers and Marshall Curry, who are with the EPIC Network, to have them give us an overview of the model itself and understand how it's working for many of our institutions. We're then going to invite 4 of our existing Kumu members at different institutions to engage in a roundtable discussion to give you some honest and real-time feedback around how this model is working for them in their campuses and communities, what encouraged them to get started, and what are some lessons they've learned as they have implemented this in their campuses. We're going to then make sure we kind of give Marshall and Joel a chance to come back and share with us anything that they heard during that roundtable that they want to kind of reinforce. And then we want to have at least 20 minutes to have Q&A. So along those lines, I want to make sure everyone knows to use the Q&A function that should be in your taskbar, either at the bottom or the top of your screen. Use it throughout the entire webinar, and I'll be collecting those and then moderating them at the end. And if there's a specific person during this webinar that you'd like to answer your question, make sure you put that in there. I'll remind you again when we start the roundtable, but please do send in your questions. That's how we will be moderating the Q&A. So you need to send them in for us to get them answered, and we're going to try to get through as many as possible. The last thing I wanted to note for anyone who was curious is how we got to today. And I think something that's really relevant is what brought Kumu and EPIC together is twofold. One, several of our members, some of them that are going to be talking to you today, have presented their program that they are using this model for at our conference. And so we were aware of some of those. But then also Kresge Foundation, one of the funders of Kumu, actually sent me an email and said, Bobby, if you haven't connected with Joel and Marshall at EPIC-NEN, you really should. I think a lot of what they're doing aligns really closely with some of the goals of Kumu. And so we took off from there. So at that, and in the essence of staying right on time, I'm going to turn it over to Marshall and Joel.
Okay, so everyone can hear me, right? Hi, I'm Joel Rogers. I teach at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm very involved in the EPIC-N, or EPIC Network, which is the network of, it itself is its own C3. But it's a network of EPIC programs around this country and abroad. Marshall, are you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Marshall Curry. I'm the program associate, and I work with Joel and our board and all of our members in the network to make sure our programs are running smoothly and getting resources they need.
And you're about to launch that.
I'm going to launch. Yeah, I'll launch the presentation so we can get going.
Okay.
1 second. There we go. Go ahead, Joel.
Okay, so that's the name of the network. But the network is just, again, the university programs that use the model, the EPIC model. EPIC stands for Educational Partnerships for Innovation in Communities. And it has 5 elements that we'll go over in a second. But basically, it's the genius of the model, if it has any, I think, is that it works with existing structures at the university. You don't have to do a whole new complicated program stuff. You just work off existing courses. And similarly at area communities, typically in our case, city governments, you work with existing lines of authority and departments, et cetera. So it works with existing stuff. It is very much, and you can think of this as the P in the EPIC thing, it's very much a partnership. This is not the view that the universities know everything, communities are fools, let's come in and tell them what to do. At all, at all, at all. What the universities do have, though, is a lot of knowledge which might be of use to those communities. And what we try to do is work through a scope of work from the community match that against possible resources at the university, again, largely centered on courses, and try to get something that's going to be of use to the community. It is intentional. That's what the I stands for. We try to promote sustainability, equity, good government, what we call high road practices. We're not prescriptive, but we don't want to. If you want us as a community to increase inequality, we're really not interested in working with you, or increase child caning, or further destroy the biosphere or whatever. So we're high road in our intention. And then it's different than service learning and a lot of other things that center largely on the students. It really thinks of itself as community driven, and the community satisfaction is really the bottom line for us. And we try to evaluate that and try to improve as we go. But it's very much community oriented. Of course, the students get something out of it. Students get something out of almost anything, but it's not a service learning thing. It's actually trying to deliver something of use to the community. And then the N, the fifth element, and you'll see this in some numbers we'll show you for average stuff, the net of working with existing structures on well-defined projects collaboratively with the community is you wind up getting an awful lot of student involvement. It's not an internship program. It doesn't burden the communities. The students are always operating under the expert guidance and discipline of the local faculty, of the faculty at the university. But you wind up getting a lot of people involved in a structured thing. And what we hear from lots of communities, we've now worked in about 200 cities, and we've done about 900 or close to 1,000 different projects with different people all over the country and now all over the world, is they're shocked by how much relatively free or very, very cheap technical assistance they're getting. But let's start with our little standard video on EPIC, and then we'll go back to those 5 things. This will just take about 2.5 minutes, I think.
Sorry.
Cities are always looking for ways to improve, whether that's by increasing quality of life or reaching economic, social, or environmental goals. Yet, at a local level, change is often hard. City staff often lack the capacity, time, knowledge, or political space to make the changes that society increasingly demands. So how can the city get knowledge into practice, facilitate positive discussions about change, and look at old problems in new ways? It turns out that what cities lack, universities have in abundance. Students have a tremendous amount of creativity and desire to make change. They're learning best practices and the latest theories, and are hungry to find ways to translate that knowledge into practice. They can facilitate conversations in the community that are less threatening and more productive, and they have a lot of time to give. Many university departments already do work related to cities in subjects like city planning, architecture, geography, law, business, journalism, landscape architecture, economics, engineering, and public administration, just to name a few. The trick is to match a city and its needs with a university and its resources, while working within the administrative structure of both, adding value to all and engaging in a scale that actually improves the outcomes for cities and universities. How does a city access students and faculty? How do instructors know what projects the community actually wants help with? And who has the time to coordinate any of it and ensure that the work is real work? That's where we come in. Think of our model as a framework that solves the university-community partnership puzzle. It fits the complicated structure of city governments and universities neatly together. There are 2 keys to the match. First, a coordinator within the university and a coordinator at the city work closely together on every aspect of the partnership. Their job is to make it easy for individuals, professors, and individual city staff members to plug into the partnership. Second, those individual instructors and staff co-develop a scope of work that ensures the work produced advances the city's plan for the year, while also meeting the educational needs and abilities of students. This 2-tiered relationship structure is a key innovation of our model. It provides quality control, ensures the projects are real, and allows busy faculty and city staff to engage easily in a partnership that provides tremendous value to their existing work responsibilities. Our model empowers cities and universities to create lasting change, trains the next generation workforce in innovative ways, and advances real efforts to improve quality of life in communities throughout the country and potentially around the world.
Okay, so that's the basic elements. Let's go through the elements. But the idea is a very light structure, a win-win for both sides. Respect the existing administrative structures. Don't try to turn your faculty into saints, and don't try to turn the local government into, I don't know, whatever. Make it a real, genuine partnership. The MOUs that the narrator described is the key to that. Make very clear what exactly the city would like to have, and then go back and forth with your existing faculty. Again, we talked about the high road stuff. I don't think we need to do more on that. And then the projects are, again, identified by the community. As a faculty member, I can tell you most faculty at universities think of communities either as, I don't know, potential guinea pigs or corpses. That is, places where they have some idea they want to try out elsewhere, and they try to get a city to try do that, take on the risk of that with them, or they just dissect. This is very, very different. And the faculty are actually refreshed that it is as different as it is. Community comes and says, I have this problem. I could really use some help solving this problem. Faculty person is doing a course on that thing. They grade some students to do a studio or a paper or whatever on that thing. And the result is, as you all know, all these problems are connected to other problems. Every problem is, in old planning language, a wicked problem. Lots and lots of interdependency. And so what we find in these programs at universities is that we get lots of courses, often from very different disciplines, coming to bear on those particular problems. And the net of that is that you get very large numbers. Here are typical numbers. This is from San Diego State University. This was for 1 year of engagement. You wound up getting 80,000 hours of student time on 14 different projects. It involved 11 different disciplines, 28 classes, 24 faculty members, altogether about 500 students, all of whom are getting some credit for this. And that is not atypical of the amount of time that cities get out of it. And what they report to us, and we've done this evaluation, is they help pay for the cost of the transaction cost engineer, the university person that was talked about in the video. They help some of the cost on that typically. And what they find is that, what they're spending on projects is, 10 to 1 or even more in terms of the return that they get on these projects is, it not only beats consultancies and other stuff in terms of cost, but it has tremendous return. And I think the last slide is simply the number of universities that are now in the network. The ones at the bottom are the foreign universities. I give you all their names, but as a domestic crowd, you'll probably recognize these at the top, some of whom are right with us on the call today. So back to you, Bobby.
Thank you, Marshall and Joel. So I am going to reshare my screen. And hopefully, or let me pull back everybody, all of our colleagues here. Hopefully everybody is seeing their video pop up. Okay, so thank you so much. And so the next, hopefully that gave you, and I know, we're doing a lot within an hour, and hopefully folks on the phone and on the webinar had a chance to look at some of this material ahead of time. But when EPIC-N was initially introduced to me as something that we should consider sharing with the CUMU membership, I started with where I always start within the network, and that is understanding how this is affecting our existing members. And so I jumped on phone calls with the 4 institutions that are represented in front of you, as well as CU Denver, so University of Colorado in Denver. And unfortunately, they're not able to join us, but they also have an EPIC and program that is called City Center, if you're interested in looking that up or learning more about it. So the folks that you can see on video are also listed here, and that includes Connie from Southern Illinois University Edwardsville, Mike from the University of Minnesota, Scott from Cal State University San Marcos, and Serena from Florida Atlantic University. I do have a number of questions to get us started, but I do want to let you know that Serena is very much new, and FAU is, I think, one of the newest implementers of the EPIC-N model. So we're going to kind of think about her questions a little differently, and she'll have definitely a different lens to bring to the conversation. So I want to start with, and maybe Connie, you could kick us off with, what has been the most valuable part of being involved in the EPIC network for you and for your campus?
For me, it would be being able to connect with faculty across campus and students across campus that as a faculty member, I haven't had the pleasure of doing as much as I'd like to. So that's been a lot of fun to watch other people's students and to learn about other programs and how they work and all of the good things that, that are going on my campus. And then also I'd have to say that one of the most valuable parts of this experience is being part of that network and working with other people who are challenged by the same sorts of challenges and have worked through them and have solutions and ideas about how we can work through them. The support has been tremendous. The resources are incredible. And the people are just fabulous. But for our campus, I think it's also reinvigorated our mission. It's reminded us of what our mission is really all about, and that is to serve. And so I'm hearing a lot of folks talk more now about, as a public institution, how are we serving our community? And this is, I've recognized, is certainly one of those paths to doing that.
Great. Mike, do you want to jump in on what's been the most valuable part of being part of this for you and University of Minnesota?
Sure. Well, I'd echo much of what Connie just said. I think the network itself is a tremendous resource. We were an early adopter of this model. We launched our program in 2012, but it's been great to be able to learn from the experience of other universities and other colleagues across the country as they implement this model as well. And just collectively, we're able to come up with much better answers and ideas and approaches to some of the issues that come up when you're implementing a program like this. I think on campus, it's been really a great way to highlight engaged teaching and engaged learning, which is a significant component of what the Research Center, where our program is located, tries to do, and offers a different model maybe from the traditional service learning model. I think it really puts the emphasis on the community, what the community gains from a partnership like this. Everything from projects being community identified to making sure the deliverables that students produce in a class are also adaptable to the community context and provide something useful and relevant that the community can work with.
Thank you. Before I jump into the next question, I do want to remind everyone to use the Q&A function to start sending in those questions so that when we get to that part of the webinar, we have a kind of a good list to start from. Scott, if you could maybe comment, as a community engagement leader on your campus, how has leveraging the EPIC-N model at Cal State San Marcos kind of fit into the broader portfolio of how you guys think about your community engagement work?
So the model's been really helpful for us here at Cal State San Marcos. We have a variety of options for faculty who want to be community engaged. And so there's kind of a menu, if you will, of things that we can talk about with faculty. This has been a great place for faculty who might be a little bit less experienced to get involved. And I think the reason for that is because of the structure that the model offers. And we can talk more about that later as we talk about some of the lessons learned and advice that we have for folks who want to move down this road. But I think for faculty, that structure really helps get into community and start to practice engaging with community. and takes away some of the fear or the apprehension around that. I will say what my other two colleagues have said already, the resources that the network offers, from sample MOUs to stories and lessons that have been learned along the way, as well as some technical assistance. You can pick up the phone and call them or other members of the network and walk through problems. It's just really nice to have that kind of learning community, if you will. And EPIC's been great about that.
Great. And something that I learned during my conversations with all of you that I think as someone who's wasn't as familiar with this until recently is that how the EPIC network model shows up on your campus is really through the definition of that program. That each one of you really has developed a program that is leveraging the model. So it's not about taking pieces and having it flow throughout your entire community engagement strategy. It's really about developing a kind of program that uses the model.
Absolutely.
So Serena at Florida Atlantic, you guys are really just in the throes of getting started this past year. So why don't you share for folks, like maybe just start with what got you on board? You know, where did this come from? And why did you think that it made sense for what you guys are working on? Oh, we cannot hear you, Serena. So I know Serena and I have been going back and forth a little bit about her audio. So I'm gonna move on to the next person, Serena, while maybe you could figure out on your end how to tie back in. I'm unable to do anything with your audio on that front. So I'm gonna come back to Connie. And one of the things that I learned through my conversation with you is that at SIUE, this really shows up from a sustainability standpoint in terms of the program itself. So could you share just a little bit about how this has kind of moved the sustainability agenda forward for your institution and how it's really tied into all of that work?
Well, we've been, like a lot of other campuses, working hard on becoming a sustainability leader and a model for the community and supporting the community and embracing that mindset and that approach to life and learning and working. And so that's part of the rubric, if you will, in terms of assessing projects. As Joel mentioned, we're looking for high road projects. And so sustainability is part of how we assess the applications and think about who we're going to partner with and on what kinds of projects we will partner with. And we are thinking of sustainability rather broadly. We're thinking about investing and enhancing quality of life in local communities. And that's really what communities are looking for. So it fits very well with that framework.
That's helpful. And Mike, what about from Minnesota's standpoint? How has this played into maybe broader strategies related to sustainability or otherwise?
Sure. Well, we were actually, when we launched, sort of straddling two administrative units, one of which was the Institute of the Environment, which obviously has an environmental focus, as you'd guess from the name. And so sustainability has been a strong thread throughout the work that we do. We're now located in a research center called the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, but much of the work that we do is focused on resiliency more broadly and not just sustainability. And so we think about resiliency really in terms of anything that would make a community more able to adapt to change or threats or shocks, and to do so in a way that allows it to thrive in the face of those challenges. And so I think it's refocused a lot of discussions on something more than just trying to sort of get by and get past the next crisis, and really think more broadly about how do you create a community that can position itself so that it's able to respond and adapt when it's faced with these kinds of challenges, whether those are environmental challenges or economic or political. And so I think it's shined a spotlight on that way of thinking about community adaptability and resilience.
That's helpful. And then I want to come back to Scott, and then we'll come back to Serena, because I think what we've heard so far, that what I took away as an important piece of this EPIC and model is the diversity of how this can play out on your campus. So for Connie and SIUE, it's really around sustainability. And for Mike and University of Minnesota, it's about community resiliency. And for Scott at Cal State San Marcos, as I understand, your program's really around kind of the broader civic engagement and kind of democracy side of things.
Absolutely. So at Cal State San Marcos, what happened when we learned about the model, we simultaneously had some conversations going on with some of our cities in our region. And they were talking to us about how students don't understand local government and how they really want students to be more engaged and more participatory. And in addition to that, we started having a workforce development conversation too, that students don't think about going and working at city government. And so we decided to put a little twist on the model. And instead of having a thread of sustainability through all of the projects, we added a thread of civic learning and civic engagement, to the point where we ask the faculty when they engage in the program that they add a learning objective to their syllabus that is specifically about civic engagement and civic learning. And then we support them with some of the infrastructure to help them achieve that outcome. So it's meeting a community need. We heard very loud and clear from our cities that they wanted students to be very explicitly learning about city government and local government and thinking about jobs that could exist there. And so we adapted the program to do that.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna jump to Serena, and I just want to say thank you to Shauna, Troy, Kathy, Ray, and Zach, who have all submitted questions. So I'm doing call outs like classrooms. So thank you to all of them, and keep them coming. So I think, Serena, your audio is working. We're going to give it a try here. That should work. There we go. And Serena, if you could share what made FAU get involved in the model.
Is the audio working?
It is.
Wonderful. Okay. So we got involved in the model actually because of Mark Schlossberg reaching out to our head faculty, Dr. John Rennie, and inviting us to take a closer look at the program. My function at the Center for Urban and Environmental Solutions is outreach. So it seemed like a natural fit for us to use the EPIC model to kind of formalize what a lot of faculty were already doing in the community. There are numerous courses that are already connected to community efforts, and we liked the idea of becoming part of a national network, actually an international network that's doing this work. So we formed the FAU Partnership for Sustainable Communities, and our first pilot program just started in January. We're just doing a very short 6-month program because that's what the city wanted. We're looking at economic development issues in an area of the city called the Warehouse District. So there's numerous aspects to increasing the density and intensity. We're looking at it from an urban planning standpoint, urban design, and we also have a couple of students from the School of Architecture, led by 2 faculty from the School of Architecture. So it's a very small program at this point, just 3 different courses and 1 specific area that the city is looking at through different lenses, such as economic development, climate change in the sense that they are experiencing more and more flooding in the area. So they're looking at signage and things of that nature. The program, the city did some of the community outreach in advance by holding a few meetings with the community to see what they wanted to do in the area. And now our job is to look at what the community wants and see what kind of planning, urban design, etc., recommendations we can make, the students can make to the city.
Thank you, Serena. So we have 5 minutes left in this part of the webinar, and I want to get through 2 questions. Something, again, that really stood out to me, kind of looking at all of your different programs that I thought was really exciting, is that within the Kumu network and the organization, we focus a lot on kind of urban-based engagement, universities that are located kind of in the core of their cities and major urban cities, and how does that urban engagement look and feel? But a lot of our members, my own home institution included here at Towson, are located in more metropolitan regions. And I think what struck me, and I know I've had this conversation with a couple of you and I'd like your take on it, about this model is how effective it can be for an institution that's really located in more of a metropolitan location, because it provided what appears to me a really great entry point to work with different municipalities from a regional lens versus just focusing on what are we doing with the large city municipalities. So if you could kind of comment on how that has kind of maybe how that's played out within your community, and maybe I'll start with Scott.
Sure. So in our region, our service area, technically, we have about 9 different municipalities. And so that gives us the opportunity to work with lots of different city governments. When we piloted it, we started with one city and had an 18-month partnership with them. We are currently in the process of trying to partner with our next city government and have been in some negotiations. And if someone has a question, I'm happy to share more. They got a little rocky and now we're switching gears. But the nice part is, as you just said, Bobby, it's a way to be able to engage with a particular city in a really concentrated way for a period of time, and then move to continue building partnerships with the other cities over future years.
Thank you. Okay. And Mike, do you want to comment on that as well?
Sure. So we're located in the Twin Cities metropolitan area. Our campus is actually located in Minneapolis and another campus in St. Paul. And we have yet to work with either Minneapolis or St. Paul as our partner. We've worked with everything from a first-ring suburb of about 11,000 people to another first-ring suburb that has about 85,000 people. And we've also worked with a few more rural communities. And I think it's just great for students to have the opportunity to think about some of these issues in, sort of across the transect, from an urban area to a rural area, issues like food insecurity, aging in place, transit, economic development, affordable housing. Those contexts being so different, they really challenge students to think outside the box about how to address those issues in different contexts.
Great. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. I want to stay on time, so I'm going to use my last question and ask Connie and Serena to answer it. Connie, if you could go first. What is one lesson learned thus far from your experience in implementing the EPIC model?
One lesson learned would be to roll with the punches. City government and learning both present a lot of challenges that are unexpected. Students are dynamic in lots of ways, and so are faculty for that matter. And so I think you just have to have a willingness to work through problems and to not get too tied up in worrying about maybe something didn't go as planned. You think about it, you revise the plan, and you've got to move forward. And yeah, that would be it.
Great. Okay, and Serena, you want to have the last word on this part?
Well, since we're about 6 weeks in, I'm not sure I'm ready to make grand statements about what we've learned. It's certainly been a joy to work with folks in the community. I've been at FAU for about 5 years, and I've had sporadic different projects with the community, but I'm really looking forward to this being a regular part of my job. So it's just, we sit here and come up with ideas, and it's lovely to think of these ideas happening in places that they matter. So that's been it's exciting to think about how rewarding that could be.
Wonderful. Okay, so this will close out our roundtable, but we are going to bring back Scott and Connie, Mike and Serena during the Q&A. But for the next 5 minutes, we just want to give Marshall and Joel a chance to come back on and give us a little bit of response to kind of what they heard before we dig into the Q&A.
Hey, Marshall, I talked a lot the first time, so why don't you start and I'll try to finish up.
Sure. I really liked how Serena put that last sentence. The EPIC model and these programs all across the country really help us take a homework assignment that a student might put on their fridge if it gets a good A or a good grade. And instead of just placing it on the fridge and then recycling it later, these projects get to go out into the communities and make some real change. I was a student and participated actually at the University of Oregon in some of their programs, and one of the projects I participated in was designing or looking at the Portland Bureau of Transportation budget and how autonomous vehicles might impact their budget in coming years. And it was really meaningful to me to be able to present to the Bureau of Transportation a document that I produced during my master's program and get real feedback, as well as know that it wasn't just going to sit with me and it might benefit them by having someone done some research on a topic that is kind of new and didn't have a lot of research out there. Maybe my citations would be helpful for them as they're devising their budgeting processes. So Serena, I think Serena's point is really what I want to hit home, is that this is an idea that if you implement on your campus, you can add it to your engagement toolbox that you're trying to leverage to connect with the municipalities around you and make some really cool things happen.
Okay, if I had to say something, it would be to emphasize the incredible flexibility of this. Remind you of your question, Bobby, about whether it fits in a metro area with a zillion different jurisdictions, townships, towns, villages, cities, unincorporated cities, whatever. And in my experience in Madison, I'm very involved in the program at the University of Wisconsin, not just the network. Yeah, we found this thing works all over the place. We did something with a relatively small town near Madison. We do ongoing stuff with Madison. Then we did a very big county, Dane County. Now we're working in a small county. But in the small county, we're working with 12 different towns within that county, blah, blah, blah. So it really, you can basically take this anywhere where there's need. Next year, we're going up to Pepin County. This is like 3,000 people. It's a tiny little county. We're trying to be statewide in the program here. The second thing, I'm very glad that Marshall talked about his experience. We didn't talk much about what the students get out of this, but my experience talking to them is that they get a lot. They get, one more line on their CV as being useful to somebody. It sure beats that two-week vacation they took in Costa Rica to solve world poverty to get into college. That was a joke, guys. They learn something about their city, and the city reciprocally gets, they're not interns, but they are sort of visible to the city people, and then they get to do the presentations at the end. And that's a very, very useful ongoing quasi-job interview. So a lot of the cities we're talking about often hire people that they've met through these EPIC programs. Yep. But also there's this about the students. They also get more confidence, and they get to speak in public and people they don't know before. But a weird thing that we've noticed, and this might be particularly relevant for Kumu members, the less resource students get particularly something out of this, because they often wind up not having the time or the family situation to participate in traditional sorts of extracurricular activities at schools. But this thing is part of their course, and they're registered for the course, and it it seems to be particularly beneficial for underserved students, under-resourced students. It might be worth keeping in mind.
Thank you, Joel. I'm going to stop there, so we're staying right on time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that hopefully you are now seeing the entire panel, entire group, and I'm making sure everyone is unmuted, hopefully. And we're going to dig in on some questions. So first there's a question of, and this is probably for Joel and Marshall, but are there examples of multiple universities using the model within a single city?
Yeah, and I think to start, I'd like to just hand it over to Mike, because he's not really in the same city maybe as St. Thomas, but it sounds like you are. So Mike, do you want to talk about that real quick?
Sure. So our main campus is located in Minneapolis, but there's another program located in St. Paul at the University of St. Thomas that we helped some staff and faculty there to launch. And it's really not been an issue. I mean, we are a large metropolitan area, so we have something like 185 jurisdictions within our 7-county metropolitan area. And I'm sure that helps to make sure that we're not tripping over each other in the community. But at the same time, I think we offer different things, right? St. Thomas is a small liberal arts college. We're a large Research One institution. And so I think our students, the programs we have are different. The kinds of assistance we can provide is different. And I could see situations where a city might choose to work both with our program and with the University of St. Thomas.
Thanks, Mike. And I have an example of another one in Washington where they're in their first year at Gonzaga University, and they're partnering with not just the city of Spokane, but many of the universities that are also in and around Spokane, and they're calling it our sustainable city. They're still working out some details, so it's still in process, but the network is designed and here to help those institutions who want to work nearby another one to collaborate and to work together to make those things successful and not competitive. And so there's some real cool solutions. Again, Mike just shared some where these types of collaborations take place, and they look like Mike and Elise, the program manager at St. Thomas, carpooling to the conference at Wisconsin, but they also look like an architecture class at the University of Oregon handing a one-semester project off to the Portland State University Urban Studies campus for the next semester. So that way the project, when it's finally handed to the city, is further along with multiple disciplines acting on it because some of the courses at one university aren't offered at the other. That's I think, my answer there, Bobby.
Thank you, Marshall. Okay, the next question I think would be great for some of the institutions to answer. So maybe we could start with you, Connie, and then also have Scott answer this one, is what types of city officials, so what kinds of titles or departments have you kind of started the conversations with related to this model?
Well, to recognize the structure, the hierarchy, right? We typically do start with mayors and city managers, but we don't stay there long. Oftentimes we're working with community development directors or economic development directors, housing directors, more directly, right? And even sometimes those folks will find contact people that are more connected to the projects at a lower level in the hierarchy. And what's interesting is our next partner, it looks like we'll have a community stakeholder as the sort of an affiliate to the municipality as a point person. So again, flexibility in the model shows up every time.
So I would suggest that, like Connie, it is going to be at a variety of levels that you're going to have conversations with folks at the city. Where I started was existing relationships that I already had. So at one city, I might have planted the seed with the public information officer or director of communications. At another city, it was the economic development manager. The way that it's going to go after that is it's going to have to get to the city manager, and there's eventually going to be a meeting with them. And then ultimately you want the buy-in of the council or whatever the governing body is. But those conversations, I think, can kind of bubble up. And then in my experience, the city manager is usually the one who picks whoever the point of contact is going to be for the program. And so at our first partner, that was the economic development manager. And so that person worked with the other departments and which projects they wanted done and that kind of stuff. I can't remember if it was Connie or Serena who talked about this, but I would like to emphasize that this is an experience in cross-cultural communication. City and any kind of government entity has its own culture and its own language and its own customs and norms. And God knows that academia has that as well. And they're not the same, they're very different. So I think communication becomes really key in talking about those differences and the languages and working past all that.
Okay, great. So I want to keep going. So Mike, maybe you could take a stab at this next one, which is how do you incentivize your faculty to use this model rather than just creating a partnership on their own?
Sure, good question. It's been really much less of an issue than I think I and others might expect getting faculty on board. I think one of the main things we provide is a committed, stable partner on the other side of the table. So faculty who work with community partners frequently know how much work that takes to find a good partner, to make sure that the project is clear, long before a class starts and students get engaged on it. The ability to take that work and have something happen with it after the course is over. And even just the day-to-day help with managing the project, working with the students to make sure that they have what they need to do the project and not expecting that the faculty will necessarily do that additional work. So for the ones who do this kind of work regularly, I think they get it, they understand the benefit. And for the ones who don't, I think it lowers the bar for entry to do this kind of work. It becomes easier to think about working with a partner and integrating a real project into a course when you have someone helping you to do that along the way.
Thanks. And I do want to come back to you, Connie, because I recall when we were having our initial phone call, I think you shared something along the lines with me that part of the difference maker of this for the faculty and the community partner is kind of your consistent thread. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think rather than, I saw something in the Q&A about levels of bureaucracy. I've not seen any sort of concern about that. Faculty instead are eager and happy to know that I'm standing in their doorway with a potential project ready to go. So we've had very good reception from our faculty, and those that want to pursue their own partnership. That's another part of our community engagement approach, and that's fine. They can do that. But those who, I think someone mentioned earlier, those faculty maybe who are new or a little reluctant, this is a really nice supportive kind of program and model to engage those faculty in the community.
Okay, so the next question, I'm not sure if any of our existing partners want to jump on this one, or if this is maybe a Marshall or Joel question, but what is the process for institutions using this model? What is the process for the community to access them, to express an interest in participating, or kind of put their hands up and say, we want to be a part of whatever your said program is?
Well, for the university or for pretty much the community, just contact the national office. We call it the secretariat. You'll get the, Marshall, I think we have a slide at the very end where you're going to show this. And Bobby, I think you're going to be reaching out to people after this, I believe, and getting them our contact information. It's pretty simple. If you're a university, if you're a community organization in a town where, I'm not sure I quite got your question, Bobby. How do you make sure that the city is not doing some nefarious thing with your university?
No, Joel. It's more like in general, all of our programs do some type of RFP process, application.
I'm sorry, you're asking how does a community?
Yeah. No worries, Joel. I got it.
Yeah. This English is really murder for me. There's a rolling RFP process. Sorry.
In general, but I do want to, if any of you panelists want to step in here, because again, with our model, it's pretty flexible to what your program needs. And so we've seen real diversity in how that's laid out and how programs work with those communities to first build the relationship, kind of like Scott described, and then bring them in through their RFP or to events to kind of show them what it looks like and maybe do some matchmaking with faculty. And then in the years after the partnership, it even looks different for each individual program. And we try to support that as the network. And again, if you want to step in here, panelists, and describe what it looks like a little more clearly, I hand it over to you.
I can say something about this. We've tried the RFP process. We've tried an application process, and it really just hasn't worked very well for us. What works well for us is to sit down in the office with the potential partner and have a conversation and have that dialogue start back and forth. And ultimately, so far at least, the right partner has sort of bubbled to the top, right? The conversation has continued longer than the others. And we get to a point where the partner sees, okay, I'm either ready or I'm not ready. And we end up with one or two that are ready to really pursue a partnership.
Scott, did you want to make a closing comment on this question?
Yeah, so the same, we've not done an RFP yet either. It has been through interest. We have the SAGE project through SDSU is in our area, and there was some media around that. And so a couple of the cities actually were interested and contacted us and said, hey, are you guys going to do anything like this? And we said, well, interestingly enough. And so we haven't done an RFP yet. Bobby, if I can, I know you're trying to keep us on time. I want to go back to the incentive question because we had kind of a unique response to this. You might have heard Joel and Marshall say that there is a fee to the city and that they pay for the services to keep the program going. We built into the budget $1,000 stipend for the faculty who participate because we recognize that it means they're going to need to do some kind of course redesign. And so they're redesigning their syllabus and rewriting that and truly integrating the project into the course. And so we wanted to honor that. And we have found that $1,000 helps separate that if faculty want to work with community on their own, they're welcome to do that. If they want to be part of Democracy in Action, our program, then this is kind of the expectations of that stipend.
Okay, that's really helpful. A question, Serena, you might be able to answer as a new program is, how is FAU, and if you haven't done this, no worries, but how is FAU orienting the students who are participating in your project these 6 months to the community they're going to be serving in?
So are you asking about the interaction between the students and the city?
Or did you do any orientation with them prior to kind of the beginning of the project to help them kind of understand the context and the kind of cultural understanding of where they were headed in terms of working?
I can tell you that our first class meeting, we invited the contact person, the staff person from the city to present on the first day of class. So they presented the results of the community outreach that the city had done. And that person also provided some history of the area, how the project had proceeded up until this point, what their goals going forward were. And they're really working towards presenting to a commission meeting, a council meeting coming up in June. And so they were had several questions and wanted new ideas, wanted fresh ideas on what the city had to do. The next, like about a month later, then we took a field trip to the community, and we were able to get the bicycles, the sky bikes in the area, and we were able to ride around with a couple of the city staff. And that was just invaluable because we're there on location. We got different explanations than we would have in a classroom. So that kind of hands-on, eyes on the project was very valuable. They will not be interacting, unfortunately, with the community on this project. I really hope that's a goal of mine, is to look for projects in which they will be able to do much more interaction, and possibly will organize, with the city, a community engagement meeting. But early days, we'll see how it progresses.
Thanks. So we only have we have about 5 minutes left, and I can tell people are intrigued because we're getting to some infrastructure questions. So a question that is being asked is, what infrastructure, if any, is going to facilitate this growing network? Is there a membership cost? What does the support structure look like going forward? If Marshall and Joel, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, we're thus far, it's been an entirely voluntary thing. Programs didn't pay into the network except a registration fee at an annual conference. But we're staffing up, and we find that we have to cover the cost of staff. So we're right now in the process of figuring out what sort of membership fee would current members of the network be willing to pay. We're suggesting if they're already in, you carried us thus far, maybe $3,000 a year. And then new members, and we're suggesting $5,000 a year. And some programs say, oh my God, I can't possibly do that. Other people say, is that all you're asking for? So it's response is all over the place. I would say that if you want to join the network between now and June, and there are requirements in that, in terms of getting the EPIC logo and adopting the program, blah, 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 there would be a fee. It would be about $3,000. But more likely your folks are going to be after our annual conference and into our next fiscal year. So it would probably be a little bit more. But we're also looking at, group buy type things, like a bunch of California schools are thinking about coming in en masse, and then we're going to try to discount it. So the answer is there is some sort of fee. I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be, but it's going to be somewhere, a few $1,000s somewhere is going to be the membership fee, okay? And then what do you get for that? Well, there's a huge amount of support you get. You can't see all of this yet, although you could talk to the members, current KUMA members who are on the phone. They can talk about a thumb drive, and then there's sort of ongoing TA or technical assistance that we are able to provide people. But we're just now in the process of constructing a very lush website, which is going to get members in the network a huge amount of better information than they currently had on all sorts of things to be useful to them in their program. But I
Great.
can't announce that yet, but stay tuned. That'll be imminent. It
Okay,
is.
great. So the last question, which I do think is important for clarity, and that is, while you're kind of articulating that there is going to be a fee coming of, you know, not a couple $1,000s for institutions to adopt the model and get the support that surrounds that. Yeah. This model is also based off of, as Scott said, an MOU process with the city, where the city is, and there's a lot of diversity to this around how that financial model can work. And I don't think we have time to go all the way around, but I know everybody kind of operates in different spaces of how, if it's on a project basis or if it's more, you know, broad on an annual basis. And I know that we will be providing contact information for all of the KUMU members on the call, so it's a great opportunity to kind of sit down and talk to them and understand what models work for individual institutions. So we are about at our time. If for, you know, 30 seconds or so, if anybody kind of wants to make a closing comment or feels like there was just something they really wanted to share that they didn't get out, Mike or Connie, Scott, Serena in particular, is there anything you want to share with the group before we close? Nope, feel like we covered it all? Okay. I want to thank everybody who participated, both on the phone as well as, of course, our panelists. Hopefully that this was helpful in getting you just more information about this specific model. And I also want to put in a plug. The KUMU call for proposals is out there, it's live. The kind of work that we're talking about on this makes for excellent presentations. And, you know, there's other models out there that, you know, I know some people are using related to thinking about how this deliberate and intentional community engagement work can happen. So consider submitting a proposal. You have almost 2 full months to get it together. So this is not a last minute ask. And the last thing I want to let you know, that the deliberate follow-up from this is that we will, from KUMU headquarters, be sending a follow-up email that will include some additional information from Joel and Marshall to help you understand how to talk with them if you're interested in a further conversation, as well as the contact information for all of our KUMU members who are on the phone or on the webinar, in case you'd like to have a more directed follow-up with one of them. And with that, I thank you. We actually had, I'm looking at the numbers, about 40 institutions from the KUMU membership joining our webinar today. So with an organization of 100 members, I would say 40% points pretty high on the interest in doing some of this more intentional city-university collaboration. So with that, thank you.